Okay, in our discussion of topic 11, the interwar period, let's look in lesson 6 today at uh, Italy and the emergence of the political philosophy called fascism. Post-war Italy, while Italy did switch sides in World War I and they were on the Allied side when it was all said and done, they didn't walk away from the Paris conference really with the things that they wanted. So they were angry about that. They were also afraid of growing radicalism with Bolshevism and communism being a little bit more prevalent. And they also had some problems with unemployment, trade deficits, high taxes, which is one of the reasons why when Benito Mussolini organizes the Fascist Party in Italy in 1919, he's seeking to address those things, largely to bring the glory back to Italy, to look at that Roman past and to put Italy back into the main central focus of Europe. So that's the thing is that he promised to make Italy better when they were suffering a lot of these things. The people that supported him were called black shirts. Lots of violence and intimidation tactics were used. 1922, he marched on Rome, put pressure on the Italian king to basically support him as prime minister. He takes the leader, or the title rather, of Il Duce, which means the leader, suppressed all political opposition, made sure that his people were elected. If people were in power that weren't fascist, he replaced them with fascist, even put pressure on the Pope to recognize and support him. And he had a great deal of support from people in Italy. Business people and industrialists liked him because he supported capitalism. He was against socialism and communism. People liked the law and order and the stability that he gave. Um, he did, though, create a totalitarian government, one in which loyalty to the state was everything. So, but people were willing to sacrifice their personal liberties for the trains running on time and for people having jobs. And Italy was now a power. Um, basically, he did create a strong, stable government, at least for a while. It did project power and confidence, and it did revive this sense of Italian pride and nationalism. A few things about fascism, since we're talking about fascist governments. They have very centralized authoritarian governments that are totalitarian, which means every aspect of life within the state is governed by the state. It is extremely nationalistic, extremely aggressive with how they deal with their neighbors, with their territories. They want to acquire these things for the good of their nation. So they're very imperialistic. They're also extremely anti-democratic. The idea of people having a voice and having a say, particularly minority groups, is something that is very alien to fascism. Okay. Um, a contrast to this is going to be the Soviet Union. Soviet Union is a communist country. They became communist in 1918 with the Bolshevik Revolution. We've already mentioned Stalin and his rise to power, or excuse me, Lenin and his rise to power. But Stalin in 1924 becomes the leader of the Soviet Union. He creates a command economy, one in which the government makes all the basic economic decisions. He sets up these series of 5-year plans because he realizes that the Soviet Union is behind the rest of the world. So he wants them to catch up, basically, giving quote, end quote, incentives to people to get them done, rewards if they achieve their goals, punishments if they don't. And the USSR did make a lot of changes in this time period. As far as industry goes, they do become industrialized, but they still lag behind with standards of living. Wages aren't good. People don't have a lot of consumer goods, and those that are around are very poorly made. Basically, this turned out to be a very inefficient form of government. Another thing that Stalin did is he collectivized the farms, which means that he took land from farmers and basically said, you're going to now farm for the state. In the Ukraine, there were some wealthy landowners, peasant landowners called kulaks, who resisted this, and they lived to regret it. Basically, Stalin liquidated this class of people, took their land, forced people to produce food. They took it off of the cities. This is called the terror famine because they don't really know how many Ukrainians died. Between 5 and 8 million. There were millions of people who died in Russia because of hunger, and all of this, and it still didn't increase crop production. Farmers didn't like to work and not get anything back for what it was that they were doing. Um, this was a totalitarian state as well as what they had in Italy in this time period. So while communist and fascist are different with their ideologies, the way that they carry things out are very often the same. So, for instance, they have prison camps called gulags. Um, there's the Great Purge that took place in the middle of the 1930s, where Stalin decided that anybody that opposed him needed to be got rid of. So anyone that basically was an old school Bolshevik, they were rounded up, either outright killed or sent to prison camps, and replaced with people that supported Stalin. The end result, though, of course, was that a lot of people that had talents for government in other parts of society were basically eliminated. And this hurt Russia or the Soviet Union in World War II. They definitely promoted through propaganda Stalin, how he was a father or an uncle to his people, taking care of them. Sometimes people refer to him as Uncle Joe outside of Russia. So he's portrayed as being this wonderful paternalistic figure, and you had better give him the respect that they were asking for. They censored the arts and only allowed certain types of expression, and that expression only if it promoted the goals of the communist revolution. They forced all the republics that were part of the Soviet Union to become Russian in culture. They made people learn Russian. Russian, for instance, was the only language taught in schools. They definitely pushed atheism. Communism denies the existence of God and sees religion as a counter-revolutionary idea. So religions, all religions, were persecuted, and figures from the state, particularly Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, are put forward as being almost divine beings. The Communist Party basically was taking the place of religion. In society, you had an elite group of people, the Soviet elite, who were the Communist Party members. They basically got the best jobs, best living conditions, best educations. Everyone else did benefit from the revolution. A lot of things were put into place that educated people and provided activities for kids, for example. Unfortunately, a lot of it also was a vehicle through which people would be indoctrinated into a communist ideology. And the reality is that while a lot of things were provided, people very often lived in very crowded conditions because there just wasn't housing available, and they lacked a lot of basic necessities. The one thing that does happen that actually is a good thing, or at least many people would think it's a good thing, is the idea that women have complete equality under the law, and women were now able to go into many fields that traditionally they were discouraged from entering. As far as foreign policy goes, the Soviet Union in this time period wanted to expand communism throughout the world. They created an organization called the Comintern, which a lot of countries viewed as being a subversive organization. They didn't want communism in their own countries. And in the United States, we've mentioned the Red Scare already. So that's one of the things that the Soviet Union wanted to do. But the other is that they wanted to provide for their security. They wanted to make sure that they could maintain their independence in a world that was starting to grow more hostile, particularly with the rise of fascism. So in 1933, the United States recognized the Soviet Union, largely for practical reasons, because of trade. They needed to have diplomatic relations with them. And you have this growing dichotomy that's happening in the 30s because people are afraid of Germany. They see that the Soviet Union would be a great ally against Germany, but they don't trust Stalin. So anyway, this ends the notes for lesson 7. We have one more to do with lesson 8.